I love doing this.
Every day?
At least. Hi, this is Michael Waitze, and welcome back to Thailand GameChanger. Hi. We are focused on the driving forces between the startup ecosystem in Thailand and Southeast Asia, produced by True Digital Park in conjunction with Michael Waitze Media. I cannot take myself seriously today. I'm joined today by Tee Chayakul, country lead for Thailand and investments lead for Thailand and Indochina at Traveloka. Tee, thank you so much for coming and doing this. How are you today?
Very happy to be here on Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. It's like a bad date for you, like a really bad date. Can you give the audience a bit of your background and some of your experience for context?
Certainly. My name is Tee. Mm-hmm. I'm Thai, and I actually grew up from the town in the south of Thailand called Hat Yai.
Hat Yai, right,
So
I remember.
Did my school there, elementary school, until I was 12. Then I got shipped off to an island, aka the UK. So did my high school and university there. And
so what was the impetus for your parents to ship you off to the UK?
my grandmother
Right.
is a Chinese immigrant from Hainan, actually.
Oh, wow.
And I believe that for her, education is important.
Paramount.
And she wants to see her grandkids actually getting decent education. So to her, England qualifies as that.
I love this trajectory though. Hainan, immigrate to Thailand, to Hat Yai, yeah?
To Koh Samui, actually.
Koh Samui.
She's from Koh Samui.
Unbelievable. Maybe people that are listening to this overseas don't understand the significance of this, but to me, like, that's really amazing. And then from there, right, Hat Yai, but anyway, and then she says, at 12, you're going to the UK.
Yes.
I want you to re-educate, like, get the best education you possibly can.
I mean, at that point, I may not have liked it,
Of
being
course.
away from them. But
At
looking
12.
back, it was the best gift that I could have had for me.
Yeah, so what happened after that?
So worked there for 3 years in the UK.
You worked there?
Yes,
Okay.
as a consultant back in 2006 to 2009.
Okay.
And at that point in 2009, decided that I wanted to come back, move a bit closer to home.
Right.
So went to Singapore, worked at Citibank for a couple of years there.
What did you do at Citibank?
I was responsible for the strategy for their incentive program.
Okay.
So it was actually the program that I worked with them as a consultant.
As a consultant, so you
So
knew a lot about it already.
So I got to go in and actually operate it and actually realize some of the perhaps things that I should have done better as an external consultant.
Right.
It was a good experience, at least.
Yeah, I like it. And then what did you do after Singapore?
My boss told me that at that point, a year in, that I should probably go and do an MBA because
Okay.
it's going to be a good learning for me.
Mm-hmm.
So decided to apply to a few, got into Harvard.
Harvard, I've heard of that.
That was not a decision. There was no decision needed for that.
But was there a reason why you didn't go back to the UK? Or do you feel like the MBA education in the United States is more relevant to what you wanted to do afterwards?
Actually, at that point, I felt that I have been in the UK for 12 plus years.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I wanted something different, and I have not really been to the US before that.
Right. What was it like living in Boston? Cold?
It was an amazing 2 years.
Yeah.
I wish I could go back, but life goes on in that case, right?
Fair enough.
The weather is not necessarily the best thing about the city,
No.
but it has its own charm, and it's a very walkable city.
Right.
And the MBA experience is
Insane, right?
amazing.
It's just insane. So I should tell you this. My mom and dad are from Boston, and I grew up south of Boston for 7 years of my life. I still have family like all around that loop around Boston. So very familiar. That's when I say it's cold there. Like my memories of Boston are just about snow, really, and lobster.
Shoveling snow.
Shoveling snow and shoveling lobster. So I don't know if you like lobster as much as I do, but yeah.
Lobster's awesome.
Awesome. So what did you do after Harvard?
So actually wanted to step back a bit, right? When I
for
was in Harvard, we had to choose our internship between the first and the second year.
So you have to do it.
We didn't have to,
You're
but
highly encouraged.
it was a good experience
Yeah.
to go and do something else. And
Got
to
it.
me, I felt I was actually thinking what I wanted to do, right? That I've done consulting, I've done corporate.
Right.
So I really didn't want to do those in my
Again.
internship.
Right.
So a lot of people kept telling me, follow your passion, do something you love, right? So it's like, okay, what do I love?
What do I love?
Came to a realization that I love playing sports.
Okay.
I love watching sports.
Yep.
I love anything about sports.
What's your favorite sport?
American football, actually.
Really?
So my favorite team is Miami Dolphins.
Oh my God.
So it's been pretty rough.
So I grew up in Boston, right?
It's been a fun 2 years.
It's been a pretty good time for me to be a Patriots fan. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
At least not this year.
No, not this year, but good enough for me. Anyway, go ahead.
So sports.
Yep.
That was actually the one thing I decided, hey,
I love this.
why not try that?
Why not?
Actually give my all?
Right.
See if I actually enjoy working this area.
Sure.
Spend time trying to find out what I could actually get in as an internship.
Okay.
And ended up getting a 2 months internship in a small startup in sports sponsorship in New York.
Interesting. What exactly is sports sponsorship?
So we go to, say, any brands. So we represented, say, Olympics 2020 from Tokyo. And then we go to a brand and then pretty much essentially sell to them, say, like, do you want to be an official pizza of the Olympics?
Right.
And try to make that deal happen, try to make sure that people can actually get the most value out of the property and make money for the property as well.
Okay.
Did that for 2 months. Really appreciated my experience there.
Right.
But I hated it.
Why? Was it the New York thing that was difficult, or was it the sports sponsorship like whole ecosystem that you just didn't enjoy so much?
It actually made me realize that I can enjoy doing certain things.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that I would love working in it.
Yeah, really interesting, right?
Working in sports, you actually have to have a lot of passion in it.
Right.
You actually have to pretty much want to die for it, right?
Yeah,
because a lot of people will work for free for Dallas Cowboys or for Manchester United.
Yeah, I mean, even at the beginning, like a guy like Bill Belichick makes like $13,000 a year because it's an honor just to be like on the field and be a coach, right?
Certainly, and it's amazing for those people.
Right.
Perhaps for me, I tend to realize that being in every industry gets to do the same function of work.
Right.
You're in finance, in sports, it's no difference than if you're in finance in any other industry.
On Wall Street, basically, right?
Exactly. And it's amazing for those people who get to be in that, who get to have work in an area where they're passionate about.
Right.
But for me, I imagine that at that point, it makes me realize that this is great, but I wanted to do something else. And the one thing that cemented my thought on that, my thought process on that was that when I was doing this 2 months of sports sponsorship sales, in reflection, I actually enjoyed the analysis, doing the modeling, the Excel work the most.
Right.
Much more so than going out talking to different people, going to an NBA offices or so on.
Right.
And it also actually made me realize that actually maybe I like consulting a lot more than I gave myself credit for.
Than I thought I did. Because that analysis is it's intrinsic to the consulting, right?
We do a lot of modeling in Excel.
Yeah, which is really cool.
PowerPoint.
Right, it's really cool stuff. And it's funny you mention this, right? Because when I was growing up as well, some of my cousins' friends were in sports, like they worked at HBO. And it was awesome because they would get me into like Meadowlands Stadium. I think I watched the Patriots play the Jets once at Meadowlands Stadium. But back then at HBO, that guy was probably making like $15,000 a year. And I was on Wall Street. I still wasn't making a ton of money. But I just thought, this dude must really love football.
And amazing for them.
And amazing for him. He's still there. And now he's not making $15,000 a year anymore. But again, it takes so much time to get to that point, right? That if you don't love it, why take the discount?
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
And to me, that actually leads to my next stage of my life, right? That it got me to really think about what I wanted to do long term.
Right.
At that point, I've been away from Thailand for nearly 17 years.
I know.
And I've always thought that Thailand, I wanted to go back to Thailand eventually.
Right.
It's still my home country.
I understand.
I still love the food.
Sure.
My family's still there.
Right.
Beforehand, there was this sense of me thinking that, it's actually a last resort, right? I wanted to get as much experience in the Western country, in the developed country before I moved back.
But you knew you were going to move back, right?
I had that feeling all the time that I can be away, but it's still not home.
I understand.
That, by the beginning of the second year of my MBA program,
right,
it actually kind of crystallized a bit to me that, hang on, if I actually don't go back now, then when am I going to go back?
Yeah.
I could just be drifting onto the next job in the US, in wherever it is, and maybe in 5 years' time, I might have regretted my move for not actually going back at all.
So you're looking in the mirror at the exact opposite experience, right? Because I made a decision. I lived in Japan for 22 years. I left in 1990 to the United States, and I've never gone back. So I've been out of the country for 30 years. But I think it's binary in a way. If you don't actively make the decision like you did, the likelihood, because what happens is you start building that life.
Yes.
And then you can't go home because it's not home anymore.
Certainly, and I remember one of my Professor Kurana actually talked about that in the last class that we had with him, that
Really?
whatever we do, don't drift.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So one of my girlfriend in college, her father said to me once, he said, you have to understand what a decision is. You either learn how to live life or life lives you.
Yes, totally.
And if you let the second thing happen, then you're just, like you say, you're just drifting along, right? You have to make the decision.
Which is also fine.
It's okay, but then you lose a little bit of your control, right?
Totally.
Go ahead.
So to me, I thought, okay, then it also cemented to me in the sense that if I don't go back now, then I'm not going to also get the experience in that country, learn the connection,
Right.
get the network and all of those as well. And it's going to be a lot more difficult for me to even make any impact.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, I still harbor that feeling when I was a kid, right? That I want to come back. I want to make Thailand strong.
Right.
I want to make a difference in my home country.
Just make it better. We'll talk about that later too, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was actually a decision. And then an email from McKinsey popped into my mailbox.
McKinsey in Thailand.
McKinsey Thailand,
And said,
Bangkok.
what? Welcome home.
There's some more in terms of why not go back to Thailand,
Right.
things like that. So applied, got in.
Good for you.
That made it pretty easy for me to actually go back
And in Bangkok, right?
in Bangkok.
So how long did you do that?
I've been at McKinsey for around just under 2 years.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah.
So working in a project across Southeast Asia.
Interesting. Was there any specific sector that you worked in?
Anything but finance at that point.
Even finance at that point, right? I'm done with that.
So, but it was fun. I really enjoyed my time there. McKinsey, it's an amazing firm. I think it's one of the top firm when it comes to how strong the culture and the value is.
Right.
And it really instilled in us a lot of discipline, problem-solving framework, and just that value of what it takes to be a good professional.
Yeah, I've always thought that working at a place like McKinsey, where there is this ethos and this system around how to get work done and how to do that work and then how to present that work, it just never goes away from you for the rest of your life. Yeah.
I agree. I agree with that totally. That
Yeah.
it makes you feel that when you're leaving at 7 p.m.
That it was worth it.
What am I doing? I actually see sunlight.
At least in Thailand, you can see sunlight. It's at 7 o'clock in New York, you're not seeing any sunlight. But yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
True. But I love my time there. Right?
Yeah,
You know,
I can
think
imagine.
it's-
I don't think anyone that I've ever met that's left McKinsey said that was horrible. Nobody. It's a special place. To me, it's like the Goldman Sachs of consulting companies.
It's not the easiest, right? But
No way.
I'm sure there's always going to be sacrifice, just
Sure,
as
sure,
any
sure.
job. But
Yeah.
it's a sacrifice I would have made again.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm envious. Sounds like a great experience. And then what did you do after that? So you left after 2 years.
So back in around April of 2015, I think my friend who was actually with McKinsey, but he moved to this startup called Traveloka.
Right.
He wanted to meet with me. I think our company Traveloka, the one that I'm currently at,
Right.
we were thinking about international expansion in early 2015
International meaning outside
outside of Indonesia.
of Indonesia.
And at that point, they were looking for country manager, and I decided to meet him just because I wanted to meet up with him. Didn't realize that it was anything to do with.
So he just called you and said, "Hey, T, do you want to get together for like a cup of coffee and maybe have dinner with me?"
Essentially, yeah. But we ended up, because I was flying in from overseas. He was
right.
actually flying out of Bangkok, so we ended up meeting in the airport.
That's awesome.
And he introduced me to the co-founder of Traveloka as well, who happened to be in town.
Oh, so
along
they were
the same
traveling
time.
at the time together.
Yes, those two, and then we met in the airport.
That's really great.
And when I saw the co-founder, it's just like,
You're like,
holy crap, I actually know you. Because I actually went to HBS together with him same year.
same year. Did he
Same
graduate
year.
with you?
He actually left
He dropped
HBS
out.
after 6 months
After 6 months.
to start something in Indonesia.
Which you didn't know what it was at the time.
I had no idea until I met him and realized, oh my God,
That's amazing.
That something is Traveloka.
That's amazing.
Which is now a $4.5 billion company.
But back then in 2015, I'm trying to remember. Now it's like 5 years ago.
Correct.
It wasn't as big as it is now.
It was non-existent back then.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, I said this to you offline, and I'll say it again online. Traveloka is a company to me that just... I thought it was Indonesian when I saw the name because the name sounds like Indonesian. Tokopedia, Traveloka. Do you know what I mean? Like it sounds like that. But it just kind of showed up out of nowhere. I don't know if it was the ads on the BTS. I don't know, actually. But one day it was just there. And everybody I know was using it. We can get into that in a second as well.
Sure.
But I knew nothing about it. It just seemed like everybody was doing it, kind of thing. Anyway, go ahead. So you had this meeting in the airport.
So I thought it was just a general meeting up, but it turns out to be, at least it turns out to be one thing leads to the other.
Right.
And I was offered this role as a country manager for Thailand at that point.
So you weren't even thinking about leaving McKinsey at the time.
No.
It wasn't like you were actively looking for something. You were just doing your job, traveling around, cranking stuff out. And your buddy said, we didn't say this. He was like, I'm introducing you to the co-founder of Traveloka.
And that was actually one of the two main reasons why I decided to make the jump.
Yeah.
Number one was really just the opportunity to build something from zero.
From zero, right?
And I thought that if I didn't do it then when? When is this opportunity going to come along again?
Yeah, never probably, right?
And the second one, which is actually thinking back equally important as well, is my trust in the co-founder, my friend. That I know him before.
Right.
I played badminton with this guy when he wasn't in this position.
Right.
He's not going to screw me over.
Right, exactly. Which is, but again, just getting back to things that like your grandfather tells you, right? It's not really what you know that matters. It's who you know that matters, and do you trust them?
And that really matters a lot.
Yeah, it does. It matters a real lot because you're not going to give up a whole bunch of embedded benefits that you already have to work for someone. You can work for someone you don't know, but you're not going to work for someone you don't trust. It's just not going to happen.
Totally agree with that.
So you actually built the entire business in Thailand?
We started from zero, actually. I still remember going to Central Param Gao to buy a switchboard so our customer operation can really start making the call.
You went to Central Ramen 9 to go buy a switchboard. It's probably a little bit different today. So you knew the founders, at least one of the founders. How many founders are there? 3?
There are 3 of them, all engineers.
Okay, so that's interesting. They're all engineers, right? So what is the founder mentality, and how does that lead to? We don't need to talk about numbers, right? But there's been pretty incredible growth since 2015. Like you said, what, $4.5 billion valuation?
Yes, that's correct.
That's big, right? It's very significant. What is it about their mentality that's led to this growth, you think?
To them, it's the focus for them is really on product, more so than anything else. Customers and product, making sure that we can have the best product available, things that the most convenient for the customers,
right?
The fastest, the easiest to use. And that has really been the genesis of why people, when they start using it,
right,
they continue to also use it.
You just stole my word. What was the genesis of the founding, right? So these 3 gentlemen knew each other already.
Yep.
And why did they found this company, and why in this sector? Because even back in 2015, you could book hotels, you can book airlines.
Yep.
That was already done, right?
That's actually a good question. I mean, you likely will have to rewind back to 2012 when my co-founder, the CEO, Ferry Unadi, was in Jakarta.
Okay.
He wanted to go back to his hometown, which is outside of Jakarta.
Right.
And he realized that it's a pain to go into 5-6 different websites, try to find some comparison.
Oh God.
And there was really nothing there to really make it easy for people to find the flights,
right,
or book the flight.
Yeah, and I will say this, the existing sites back then, even something like Kayak or some Expedia and those big companies, I never found really super useful.
They may be able to do the international flights.
Yeah, maybe, but
definitely
not
the local flights.
No way. No way. That was completely ignored by these big American and big European companies. So
Yep.
go ahead.
So that was really the genesis for, say, Furry and his two co-founders, right? It's
Right.
like, hang on,
Someone's got to fix this.
if I have this problem,
Right.
there's going to be others. And in a way, it's also timely in the sense that he realized that he had to do it at that point, or
Right.
someone else might come in and do it before him.
Right. Because it's
Hence, it expedited his decision to also leave Harvard Business School
right.
in that time as well.
And what were the other two founders doing when he was at Harvard, or were they there as well?
I actually don't remember it,
Yeah,
but they
neither
were
do I.
either in Indonesia or it was something that they were also already friends at that point.
Got it,
So
got it,
they
got it.
all decided to get together. It's like, let's solve this problem.
Got it. So you mentioned that they're all engineers, right? And that they had this product, the focus on the product. What's the difference in your mind, at least, between a company that's product focused and one that's business focused, right? Because it's a very different thing.
Perhaps the difference is really just as any company will have their own prioritization.
Right.
Right? That certain other companies, if your co-founders are more business led,
Yep.
a lot of the priorities may be in making sure that things get out, do more marketing, do more
Got it.
1, 2, 3.
It's some different mentality, right?
Whereas for us, we really still see Furry actually go onto different Slack channels and actually really dig deeper into. I saw this complaint from Thailand. What happened?
Right. Why? Yeah.
Why? What do we need to fix and so on?
So how would you characterize the culture at Traveloka? Just at scale, right?
The culture for us, I would say that it actually comes down from also our co-founders who are a little bit more of an introvert comparing to the other big tech companies. So I tend to think that we are a lot more collegial. There's this sense that there's more collaborativeness within the team, within Traveloka, that has helped us to really build a lot of good things together.
And so when you built the business in Thailand, did you try to bring that culture that already existed in Indonesia and try to make sure that it existed in Thailand as well?
There's a lot of that as well. And I think that's also a lot of challenges of having an office outside of the core company.
Absolutely.
So the culture itself has to be the main thing that really
Sure.
brings everything together.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to be there to see the co-founders or the founding team actually being in action.
Right. I mean, to be fair, when I left the Tokyo office of Goldman Sachs to go to the New York office of Goldman Sachs to go to the London office, it was pretty much the same. Way more people, but still very hard to do.
Yep.
Really hard to do.
Which it's actually a good question that you raise because it's an interesting contrast for me to come from McKinsey into
Okay.
this environment.
Tell me why.
McKinsey, they've been there for a very long time.
Decades, yeah.
Their culture, I would say, is one of the most embedded,
Right.
and people actually know.
Yeah.
People actually are very well versed in that, and that's what they live by.
Right.
So when I went into the firm, it was a lot easier to really try to really be part of that culture because it already exists.
Yeah.
Very strongly.
Yeah, you weren't building that culture. You were adapting to it.
Yep.
Right.
Whereas being in a firm, say in Traveloka, when we really just started, as much as I'd like to say that we got everything right,
No one gets everything right, but yeah.
the culture aspect, especially across geographical divide,
Right.
has to be something that it was a work in progress, and then it took a lot of the time to make sure that we actually got everything to where we are today.
Right. And I would say that in the startup world, particularly in the companies that are growing as fast as Traveloka is, we can look at some other companies that emanate from the United States and other places, but you can see that culture is literally dropped down from leadership. And if leadership behaves in a certain way,
The whole company.
the whole
will-
company behaves that way because they feel like not only is it okay, but it's expected, right? And that culture is derived from the behavior that you see other senior managers doing. And if you don't behave that way, in a way, you'll be expelled almost naturally, right? You know the companies I'm talking about, but if the culture is bad, the company ends up being bad in a way, yeah?
And each company, each leaders, of course, have that accountability to make sure.
Absolutely. And when you get hired, right, to be the country lead, you can feel that pressure. Like, I can't ruin the company culture. So I've got to make sure I enhance it and build it here as well.
Yep.
Because everyone that comes from underneath you, per se, that interacts with people in other parts of the company are a reflection on you.
Yep.
Yeah.
In hindsight, there's of course a lot of things I wish I could have gone back and and redo, but that can be a discussion for another day.
Surely. Can we talk in a little bit more general terms, right, about the state of the startup ecosystem in Thailand? Are there equivalencies anywhere else in the world? And what's your feeling on how things look today from your viewpoint?
Love that question actually, because that's actually a lot of, in my capacity now, working also as an investment lead for Thailand and Vietnam.
Absolutely.
That's actually a lot of the discussion I had with both the startups and also a lot of the investment communities of where we stand, both in Thailand and also for me also talking with people in Vietnam as well.
Right.
The one analogy, the one comparison that I really, really like is actually, I think, from my boss, Henrik Susanto, actually, who actually said that, make a comparison that Thailand has a lot of similarity with Japan.
Okay.
And in stark contrast to what Vietnam and to a certain extent Indonesia tend to be a lot more similar to South Korea.
So can we break that down? Let's start with the Japan-Thailand equivalency, right? Because I feel like I'm more Japanese than you are, and you're definitely way more Thai than I am. But I want to understand why you think so, and then I want you to switch to the Vietnam-Indonesia to South Korea equivalency.
So for Thailand and Japan, you can certainly correct me in anything, but
go ahead.
I tend to think that the conglomerate, the corporate, is very strong in both countries.
And concentrated.
And very concentrated in a few of those.
That I can definitely agree with you on.
They have done amazing things for both of our countries.
Absolutely.
But on the other side, it also leaves fewer rooms for a lot of the startups to actually come up and do a lot of things comparing to a lot of other countries.
That's a fascinating comment, actually. I had not considered that as a way to look at them similarly, because you're right, in a way, the startup ecosystem in Japan is still kind of nascent. And you would think that a country that's that far up the economic curve, the third largest economy in the world, would have this really vibrant, dynamic startup ecosystem. But yeah, maybe the corporates kind of suck up all the air, the conglomerates, right? The zaibatsu. And it leaves little room for companies to do that ex-corporate innovation.
And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
I didn't say it was bad.
The likes of True, Central, all of our conglomerate in Thailand, they're doing a lot of super innovative, super amazing things too. It's just a different dynamic.
Yeah, it's just a different dynamic. Like, it's not preordained. No one gives you the right to have a startup company per se.
Yep.
But you do kind of have a right for innovation. You don't want stagnation, right?
Totally.
Okay. Now, how about the Vietnam and Indonesia to South Korea?
So you tend to see, I can probably talk a bit more about Vietnam in the sense that the conglomerates are not as strong in there. So there are actually quite a lot of areas where startups can actually stake the claim in the country, in particular market. And you tend to see a lot bigger startups growing there. Korea, I think there are quite a few more that you can actually list, similar to, say, Vietnam, in comparison to Japan and Thailand.
Yeah, so the Vietnam equivalency I completely get, right? The conglomerates in Indonesia, obviously very strong as well, but in a different way.
In a different way.
In a very different way. There's still massive gaps there that need to get filled, and we've seen them get filled by Traveloka, but also by Tokopedia, by Gojek. Very
Bukalapak.
Yeah, Bukalapak, all these companies, right? So it's obvious. We don't have to guess. In South Korea, we already talked about it, but Line, Naver is a original startup company. You have daily deal sites that started there that become billion-dollar companies, right?
Buwa Brothers, all of those.
Yeah, all of those, right? Even though Samsung is still like 17% of the GDP, but they don't get in the way necessarily, and not in a negative way as the conglomerates in Japan do, or maybe in Thailand, because there's a lot of innovation there anyway.
Yep.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Yeah, so I was going to ask you, what do you think is going to have the most impact on the ecosystem in Thailand? But I think the answer is the corporates, right?
It's a big player. It's
Huge.
a big play in everything that we actually do. So we can't really, in a way, that's the system, in my opinion, that's the system that we have set up here.
Right.
And it will be, that particular block will actually exert quite a lot of influence in a very good way in our system.
Right. So it leads me to believe that the companies that can innovate along with the corporates. So it's not CVC per se, so not corporate venture capital per se, but it's maybe corporate venture building. And I think it gives an edge to a company like Plug and Play, right, who just opened an office in Thailand in October, November of last year, because their entire business model is based on, not the entire thing, but most of it's based on talking to a bunch of corporate sponsors, corporate partners, and finding out where their market gaps are, and then going out and finding entrepreneurs to fill those gaps. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I've been saying that for a while, actually, but I don't disagree with you.
Or the other place that a lot of the startups tend to like the whole B2C model, right? Getting your names up.
Sure.
But working in Traveloka, I know that it's not easy.
No way. No, because consumers are really fickle. The B2B business is much stickier, right? Because it's hard if you have a corporate to corporate relationship. Breaking that relationship means now you've got to find another massive partner to fill that gap. But if you're a consumer, like my loyalty is to the people that provide the best service. And if that service changes, it's not as sticky for me as an individual to switch service providers, right?
Certainly.
So it's definitely a different business model.
And if what I mentioned is actually the case, the corporate is stronger there, they're going to also be a stronger customers comparing to other countries as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because those relationships are going to be much tighter, deeply enmeshed, right? Yeah. Let me ask you one last thing. What do you think is going to change the game in Thailand?
Are you talking specifically on the whole ecosystem or specifically on the startup?
No, the whole ecosystem.
Good question. I wish there's a silver bullet.
There isn't.
What I wish we could actually see more is really for a lot of the companies, for them to actually really start thinking more regionally.
Yeah.
I do believe that that's actually the case.
Good
because
answer.
Many Thailand, we actually have a pretty good sizable market.
Very.
But it also is in that danger zone in the sense that it's not too small. But it's not too small, so people can actually live pretty well. But it's also not big enough like Indonesia, where you can just stay in one market, or China, where you can just stay in one market and become a unicorn, become a billionaire.
Right. So I call it the Goldilocks economy in Southeast Asia, right? Because it's like just the right size, not too small, not too big. But if you want to have like if you want to do something ambitious and audacious, you have to at least think regionally.
And it's to the point that if we don't do that, someone else, Vietnam, who may be still behind us in terms of GDP per capita and so on. Those countries, or even Philippines, they're actually going to come in, take that space.
Right. So the Philippines, again, 100 million people, the 5th largest English-speaking country in the world, which gives them a bit of an edge, right? And Vietnam, which has a history of mercantilism and has 95 to 100 million people in it as well. Yeah, it's bigger. So they can do more things there, right?
And again, this may be controversial to say, but a lot of the people in Vietnam are also very hungry to do whatever it takes.
Well, think
because
about
of their history as
they're
well.
So the Vietnam War era, I mean, the Vietnam War ended in 1973. The last American troops left in 1975 in disgrace, right? But this is the best generation ever to be in Vietnam, because it's the first time ever that a generation is born into a country where there's no foreign leadership, right? And those people look around and say, my grandparents and my parents struggled like crazy to give me the opportunity to have this freedom to build something from scratch. I'm not going to give it up.
Very true. And just to add to that, because my wife being Vietnamese,
that's great.
I've seen it firsthand.
Sure.
Like that.
Tell me.
They're not only that they think like that, but their parents who have been through war actually built up a lot of those lessons, a lot of those discipline on them. That although my current generation, the Vietnamese equivalent, they may not have been hungry or lived through war. They know what they don't want to be, because their parents will instill a lot of those in them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to end, actually. Tee, this has been a great conversation. I really want to thank you for coming in and doing this. Tee Chayakul, the country lead for Thailand and investment lead for Thailand and Indochina Traveloka. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been really fun.
Awesome. Thank you.